Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley broadcasting tonight from Tehran, Iran. I've been here for several days, taking part in an international conference on Hollywood and related issues, but also engaging in a lot of discussions on the world strategic situation. The delegation here for the conference from many countries, good group of people from the U.S. We had Danny Schechter of various international cable TV, the News Dissector website. We had some professors. We're going to hear from one later in the broadcast. That's Colin Cavell from the Mount Holyoke Community College in Massachusetts. We're going to interview him about 8.5 years that he spent in Bahrain, teaching political science in that emirate out in the Gulf. And we're going to have an in-depth strategic analysis of Iran and everything in the region from Professor Nader Talebzadeh, who was an independent filmmaker, film producer, and television personality, really, because he is the host of a talk show called Raz, R-A-Z-Z, Raz meaning The Secret, and he has an audience each time the show peaks, that is, not at the beginning, not at the end, but sort of in the middle. 7 million people tune into Raz. This is in the great tradition of these late night discussion programs here in the Middle East. But if he has 7 million people, it means he's got about 10% of the entire country. And I've just come from his studio where we had a live broadcast, which was beamed out on the fourth program of the Iranian television. I've also been interviewed tonight, took part in a panel discussion at Press TV with some Occupy Wall Street activists in Washington, D.C. and in San Francisco, California, and taped a lot of interviews, done quite a bit of, public speaking, talked to a couple of associations here. And I guess obviously the high point of the trip was the delegation at the Hollywoodism conference was received by the president of the Republic, Ahmadinejad, and I was one of those who got to give a short greeting to that assembly with President Ahmadinejad there. This I'll post the text of this on the website as time permits. So do stay close. The Twitter doesn't really work from here for various reasons, but the internet does. So we'll have a full program tonight. We're a little bit late because of some problems between Friday and Sunday night, but now this has, I think, been obviated, so off we go. We are here, of course, in the shadow of war, and we've got a darkling plain of confused alarms of imminent war. Every day that goes by, we've got some outrageous threat being launched by some demagogic politician in the United States, in Israel, in France, Britain, some other country. The situation in Iran remains remarkably calm. Some might even say it might be better to be a little bit more concerned, but the placid everyday life here is actually quite impressive. You come to Tehran, you're impressed by a lot of modern construction, a lot of very modern, comfortable high-rise buildings, a lot of economic activity, bustling streets. There are, as we will hear, economic sanctions that are beginning to bite. Some people would say that prices have doubled in approximately the last 2 or 3 weeks. This is largely the result of the U.S. economic warfare measures, the so-called sanctions, And you'll remember that not only will the U.S. refuse to deal with the Iranian central bank, but they will have a secondary boycott against anybody who does deal with the Iranian central bank. So that has had quite some effect. We've had the Europeans making some blustering threats. They're going to stop buying Iranian oil. The Iranians said, fine, if you don't want it, we'll cut it off right now. And we've just had a parade of NATO European ambassadors to the Iranian parliament, the Majlis, and to the Iranian foreign ministry saying, please, we didn't mean it. Please give us more time. I think a maneuver to try to stall things until we get into warmer weather when the Europeans think they can perhaps engage in their economic boycott without freezing to death here in the dark. The other question, of course, is the general war danger. We have some good news to report about this. Last night, as I think everybody knows by now, in the UN General Assembly, the unfortunate Susan Rice, the UN ambassador of the United States, attempted to ram through her war resolution. Make no mistake, whatever the words were, this was a prelude to severe economic sanctions, attempted regime change, a no-fly zone, bombing, a civil war, the escalated presence of NATO death squads in Syria, and much to the relief of humanity, the Russian Federation and China took a courageous stance against the imperialist bandits and vetoed that measure. Certainly, comic relief was provided by the apoplectic ranting of the unfortunate Susan Rice, a hissy fit, I guess we can call it, after the Chinese and the Russians registered their veto. She was beside herself with rage. I'm surprised she didn't start yelling that she was melting and disappear into the floor. Hillary Clinton, of course, not far behind. These harpies of the Obama administration, these furies or Eumenides. We've got Cloto Lachesis and so forth. Electo, not far behind. That would be Samantha Power in the National Security Council. This is a real public service by Russia and China. It means that there may be some hope now to avoid a general war, because an attack on Syria, unfortunately, will bring a general Middle East war because of the obvious mechanisms of retaliation. If Syria is hit, Iran will launch, I believe. The Israelis will be on the receiving end, and from other sources other than just Iran, and at that point, hold on to your hat. So that's highly significant. We're also told news reached our conference. We had a distinguished Russian representative named Maxim Shevchenko, and he left the conference on Friday afternoon late, and then proceeded to Moscow, where he became one of the speakers. It may not be reported in the West. I haven't seen what the Western characters are saying, but there were two demonstrations in Moscow. There was a demonstration of a gaggle of odious NATO operatives, the so-called White Revolution, addressed by the demagogue Navalny. These are the anti-national forces. They're also the racist forces, right? Given Navalny's racist demagogy, they were talking about building a wall along the border between Russia and the Caucasus, Transcaucasus. In other words, a racist wall of partition and ethnic cleansing and all the rest of it. So that was the smaller of the two demonstrations. The larger one was a gathering of Russian nationalists. I think it's fair to say that they were in very critical support of Putin, but support nevertheless. They were certainly opposed to the subversive White Revolution, which would be the return of the oligarchs and the collapse of Russian resistance inside the United Nations. If you want to see the reactionary to fascist character of these color revolutions, just look at the Russian one. If that White Revolution goes through, the Russian veto in the Security Council will dissolve and disappear, and we'll have Obama, Panetta, Rice, and Hillary, Samantha Power, General Petraeus storming to attack Syria at the earliest possible opportunity. So we need Russia to hang tough. Shevchenko was at the conference. He then proceeded back, and he was one of the main speakers at the larger of the two. I understand the larger one had 140,000 people, and he addressed that, and he also addressed some television programs after the fact. So don't think that whole Moscow Sunday yesterday was, or Saturday yesterday was all homogeneous NATO stooges. It was not. Thank God the Russian Federation still has some patriotic forces, but again, these are not the racist, chauvinist, sort of national Bolshevik types that gaggle around Navalny, Limonov, Kasparov, people like this. So more power to Maxim Shevchenko and his friends. He, by the way, was someone who we used to work for and has now returned to the first program of the Russian state television. He was fired in the summer at about the same time that Ambassador Chamov was fired. Maxim Shevchenko had accused Medvedev of a crime, and he was fired by Medvedev. He's now been reinstated because of the ascendancy of Putin. Now, if that's what we find in Russia, then that is good news from Moscow. Tonight, we'd also want to commend Vitaly Churkin at the United Nations. We've had our differences with him in the past, but he took an important stand. And as he said, where's the rule that says that the decisions of the Arab League should simply be parroted verbatim by the 5 permanent members of the Security Council? Don't they get a chance to do anything autonomous? Of course they do. And this whole Anglo-American position is simply ridiculous. So there's where we stand. We're going to have a lot more about Iran next week. But again, tonight we already have two major interviews about the situation in the Gulf and in Iran, and ranging pretty widely. And I think there's some hope for a positive outcome. So we probably would proceed at this point to those things. Bear with me a little bit. We're on the road here, and takes a little while. We got some interesting discussion of the attempted color revolution coup in Iran during the interview with Nader Talebzadeh. We've also met a number of people. We gave already a lecture to some master's degree candidates at one of the leading universities here in Tehran. So I guess without further ado, we're going to go on. So you're going to hear 2 more segments after this. After this introduction, you will hear the interview with Nader Talebzadeh, wide-ranging. It's about an hour or thereabouts, strategic overview. And then to conclude, we've got Professor Colin Cavell, Texan, lives in the Austin area, but he teaches by distance learning at the Holyoke Community College in Massachusetts. So everything's fine here, and we'll have a lot more during the week. So remember, get active or get radioactive, and we'll be back in just a minute on World Crisis Radio. We're recording on the evening of Sunday, the 6th of February here in Tehran. So back in a second, and off we go. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting this week once again from Tehran, Iran. And we're here in the capital of Iran and looking out at the mountains that are along the north edge of the city, and a light snow is falling, and the atmosphere, as far as that goes, is delightful. And we're here with Professor Nader Talebzadeh, who is an independent filmmaker. He is a film producer, and a television commentator. In particular, he is the host of the weekly television broadcast entitled Raz, R-A-Z-Z, The Secret. And this is about current events with deeper insights that you're going to find naturally in the U.S. mainstream media. The audience for Raz is estimated at about 7 million people at the peak listening time during the broadcast, and it's each week. So this gets us to almost 10% of the entire population of the country. So this is obviously an influential broadcast. Now, we're of course sitting here. Let me just remind people what the atmosphere is as we're taping here on Sunday, the 5th of February, here in Tehran. The situation in this part of the world is very hot. We've got every day some Israeli politician or U.S. Political demagogue of the Obama regime launches some crude threat against Iran. I've been working with a kind of a laundry list of what's going on. We have economic sanctions championed by Obama, Hillary Clinton, Susan Rice. We've got the illegal spying by drones, Predator drones, Reaper drones, and other drones. We've got the U.S. military forces that remain in Iraq and many, many tens of thousands of contractors, that is mercenary killers, that remain there. We've got the U.S. forces in Afghanistan continuously. We've got U.S. forces, for that matter, in Pakistan, even though their supply lines remain cut. We've got U.S. bases in Kuwait, in Saudi Arabia, in Bahrain, all along the southern coast of the Gulf. We've got the U.S. fleet in the Gulf with at least one aircraft carrier in that very narrow sea. We've got basically a policy of state terrorism by the U.S., the assassination of Iranian nuclear scientists, and we've got these mysterious explosions that go off at Iranian scientific facilities. And of course, on top of all that, we've got this constant policy of threats, the threat of force, illegal under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, right? Nuclear states are not supposed to threaten non-nuclear states, but they do it anyway, and then they try to use the Non-Proliferation Treaty as a fig leaf. So, welcome to Professor Talebzadeh, and let's sort of start from this overall strategic situation. I mean, you just heard my take as a series of headlines. How do you see all this? And please take your time. We have all the time we need.
Yes, thank you very much. In the name of God, I am very pleased to be able to speak with your audience at this time as we're sitting here at noon in Tehran with the snow falling. Besides the snow falling, we've had a lot of hastened demonization of Iran for the past a good 30 years. And I've been witnessing it because I came from New York, Manhattan, 2 months before the revolution, 1979. I've been here ever since. So I'm a witness of what's been going on. I used to work with CBS and NBC right before the revolution occurred and a couple months afterwards. And I've witnessed the beginning of the demonization by the media. I remember there was one correspondent from CBS, from Wisconsin, I believe the man was, CBS News, and he was asked to do a story on the Jewish emigration out of Iran, like 2 or 3 months after the revolution. And the man made a very nice report, and then they would not broadcast it. This is my first lesson in media. And the reason was, whatever he reported, and wherever we went to interview Jewish businessmen, usually just businessmen, they didn't want to leave Iran. They were not pressured or anything, and it was a positive story. We interviewed them in the office. Then we went to the tennis court where they were practicing their tennis, and it ended up being a very positive story. And New York refused to broadcast it, and this correspondent was very angry. And I asked him, "Why are you so angry?" And he said, "It's the same. Every time I do a positive story about the Jewish minority, there's so much sensitivity." That was a big lesson of how it's manipulated. Because we worked on that report for a week, and I saw in actuality random interviews with different Jewish people in Iran. They continue to live in Iran in around 25,000. So today, anyhow, I've been here for the past 33 years, and I've been witnessing many different things. For the good part of the past 2 decades, I've watched steady propaganda against Iran, and I'm inside of Iran. None of these things that they're talking about exist. It's basically a lot of havoc or charged up negative propaganda that comes from the lobbies in Washington against Iran. You could question me about individual cases, and I could tell you. And the highlight, the apex of all this is we are being threatened with war now. But if you walk into the streets, people are nonchalant about it. It's as if it doesn't know threats exist. This is the curious thing. It's a magical thing that I can't understand. People walk in this city of 17 million, but no one's thinking about building a shelter or storing up food or running around in a panic. It's as if they know, nothing could happen. This I don't understand. But on the other side, where I check the news every day, through the internet, through the television programs, the U.S. television, there's so much ongoing threat from Israel, from the neocons. I read the articles, but I take a glimpse at the Iranian media, printed media, television media. Yes, they talk a little bit about it because it exists, but it's not focal. It's not glamorized into something that we have to be really scared of. This is a curious thing, that the nonchalantness, the coolness about this.
Then we could just focus on this, because I'm also struck by this, and I'm not sure this is wise. We've had this climate of threat for 7 or 8 years now. Mm-hmm. It seemed to me that the threat emerged pretty soon after 9/11, pretty soon after the attack by the U.S. and the coalition against Iraq. You began to hear Cheney, Bush, the neocons starting to talk about the road to Tehran and how Baghdad is on the road to Tehran, or however they put it. And it seemed to me there was a big danger in 2004, some kind of October surprise to get Bush reelected. And then again in 2007, when we had Operation Bite, the supposed attack on Iran on Good Friday morning in the Christian calendar, or it could have been a little bit later, August, September 2007, which is the time of that rogue B-52 that the Cheney group had taken out of the U.S. command and control. Since 2007, it had tended to calm down a little bit, but then back in the summer of let's say between 2010 and 2011, a hue and cry began to emerge from these people in the Gulf, from the Emir of Qatar, from the Saudis and others. They went to Aspen, Colorado, and began demanding that the U.S. take military action against Iran. So it seems to me we're in the middle of this now. I would take this very seriously, and I find that people are a little bit complacent. And again, I wonder whether that's wise. I don't think the government is complacent. We just had, for the Friday prayers, the day before yesterday, we had the Supreme Religious Authority, Ayatollah Khamenei, essentially issue a warning, which is, I think it's standard practice. If you're being threatened, well, you have to rally your people and you have to make some kind of a counter statement. But when you talk to the average person, they say this will never happen. And I really wonder, is this wise?
Iran has not aggressed against any country. We have not threatened any country. We were threatened and we were invaded by Iraqi army right a year after the revolution, with the full support of the U.S., the Soviet Union, France, England, the whole coalition. Even the Cold War enemies were Cold War partners when the 8-year war was started by Saddam against us. We didn't threaten, we were invaded. And ever since that war, which was an 8-year practice for us, Iran changed from an ordinary country that had gone through a revolution to a military. It was able to defend itself. Right after the war, we had to learn how to make missiles, because during the war, nobody would sell us a missile. The Soviet Union would not sell us a missile. We had to buy really awkward-looking missiles from North Korea, which didn't work really well. So we learned how to create weapons, because nobody would sell us anything during those 8 years. They gave everything away to Saddam. Saddam has about 200 French jets had hundreds and hundreds of Sohos and all different kinds of Topolovs, all kinds of different fighter jets from the Soviet Union, Mirage from France, and Iran could not get any arsenal from anywhere. So we learned how to fight on our feet and defend the land. When the 8-year war ended, there was a serious desire to be able to make weapons independently. Iran suddenly started making missiles. And one of those things that the West is really worried about is missiles. Iran has made Shahab 3 missiles that can travel hundreds of miles, perhaps thousands of miles. Well, they have to know that those 8 years that they supported Saddam, and the Soviet Union supported Saddam, and France supported Saddam, they gave everything they had to Saddam. Saddam became an enemy of the U.S. after the war with Iran. Yeah. Until then, he was their grandmother, supported, and they supported him. So we learned the hard way not to trust the West. And today we're fortified. We have weapons, we've built, but we're not aggressors. There's no sense in aggressing people. Iran doesn't have a history of aggression. Look into the past 4 centuries. The last time Iran aggressed was during the time of Nader Shah, and that was when he attacked India. This is when they're attacking with elephants and camels.
And when was this?
About 400 years ago. 400 years ago.
And the attack in the regime in India would have been what, the Mughal Empire?
Yes, and they were swept away. The last time Nader Shah was a military genius, and he was a total exception.
Your namesake.
Yeah. In fact, his name was Nader Gholi after him. My name is also Nader Gholi Talibzadeh. Anyhow, we learned the hard way. But Iran has been always a non-aggressive country, and the temperament of the Iranian people is not aggressive. Those people who lived in Iran, including many Jewish people who've lived in Iran before the revolution, they know very well what I'm talking about. The temperament of the Iranian people. Let me tell you 2 facts that mostly the American audience does not know. Iran is the home of the first church in the world. It still has that church in northeastern Iran. It's called...
You mean the first Christian church?
Christian church that ever existed in the world. The Christians could not go to the Roman Empire because they were massacred by the Roman Empire. 3 centuries and a half after the beginning, the advent of Christianity, Iran was the home of the first tribe of Christians, the Armenians, who lived in Iran, who brought Christianity to Iran, in the Iranian Empire. And the Iranians were Zoroastrian. So it doesn't matter whether they were Zoroastrians or later on Muslims. They always welcomed the Christians and the Jewish people. The Jewish people have lived in Iran for thousands of years. At least 10 of the Old Testament prophets are in Iran. Joshua is buried in Isfahan. Daniel is buried in Susa. Ezekiel is buried in Desful. Major prophets of Bani Israel, the Old Testament prophets. So how did these prophets end up here? I mean, a couple of days ago, I was talking to Rabbi David Cohen, Aaron Cohen, who came from London, right. And I was telling him about Joshua. He said, "I didn't know Joshua." I said, "Yes, go visit Takht Fulad Cemetery in Isfahan. There is Joshua. He's visited by hundreds of Iranians every day who go to his grave and pray. Muslims, not Jewish people."
So he counts as a prophet in Islam as well?
Yes, of course. He's also our prophet. Go to the most ancient church in the world. It's called Qara Kilisa, or Black Church, in northeastern Iran, full of pilgrims, Armenian and other denominations in Iran, which is also the place of the burial of Bartholomew, one of the disciples of Jesus. So if Iran has been the home of Christians and Jews for thousands of years, and this is documented, and when after the revolution, one of the first things that happened, they had members of the Christian community and Jewish community in the parliament. Up to this day, they have representation. And there's never been anything against Jewish and Christians. This is a peaceful country. How did we get demonized so effectively by certain lobbies in the U.S. and Israel? This is something the Americans have to think about. They'll have to think about it sooner or later. Americans will come to realize, you have come to Iran. Thank you very much for coming. Many people are afraid to come to Iran. You've broken that ice. You've come, and that's great. But in the future, I see many more Americans. I was educated in Iran in a Presbyterian high school. It used to be a Presbyterian Christian hospital, and later on it became a high school, the community school. I was educated with American teachers. Iran was flooded with scholars and teachers from the West, particularly from America. What happened at the advent of the Islamic Revolution? Iran became a demon. It became an axis of evil. Where is this evil? I mean, what have we done to deserve this grand title? We were invaded by Saddam that was supported by you. Afterwards, all we did is try to defend ourselves. We need missiles to defend ourselves. We've been accused of building a bomb. We have signed all the agreements that allows the West to check every scientific industrial complex to check if we have nuclear intentions for weapons. All the intelligence communities of America have verified that Iran is not bent on making. But how come now we are a threat to the world peace? And this continues in the Congress, in the Senate, in the White House, in the State Department, all the media. And this is a big puzzle that one day will be deciphered, and people will feel sorry. I hope nothing happens. I hope we won't climax into a war. But this, from what I've seen, and if you go into the street and do your own investigation, this is the bland truth of what's going on. They have orchestrated this hatred and this demonization, and there's an answer to that, if I may talk about it now.
Sure.
I think the main reason that they want to demonize Iran with this nuclear bomb smokescreen is because after Hamas came into being, after an election in Palestine, Hamas is a nightmare for Israel. And after Hezbollah was able to defeat the Israelis' occupation for 18 years, occupying half of Lebanon in the year 2000, and the 2006 33-day war, and Hezbollah was able to defend its land against Israeli aggression. Israel could not go beyond Bent Jubail, a village 2 kilometers inside. They could not even go, and they lost about 100 Merkavas. Right. So that's a very bitter lesson. And they consider Iran the backbone of these two movements. They actually call them terrorists. One is Hezbollah, who was able to oust Israel, who occupied Lebanon. The other one is a democratically elected people of Palestine. They cannot tolerate these two because they feel threatened by their existence. And the Palestinian population inside Palestine, and occupied Palestine, as we say, and Israel, as the West says. So this is why Iran is demonized, because they want to change their regime so they can sleep tight. They're worried, the existential threat. But Iran is not threatening Israel. Israel is threatened by its own Palestinian population, who was democratically elected. And Hezbollah is not a threat unless you aggress against it. Hezbollah was able to oust Israel out of Lebanon, these are all American principles: democracy, self-defense. I mean, where is Thomas Jefferson? Where is Madison? Where is George Washington? Where have the founding fathers disappeared? And so this is the situation.
Now, that's of course very, very, very interesting. The U.S. strategy so far is economic sanctions, and we now have this new round of economic sanctions against the Iranian central bank, which includes this secondary boycott, that the U.S. won't deal with the Iranian central bank. That's not really new, but now it's any other country. If you're China, if you're Germany, whoever you are, the U.S. will boycott you if you deal with the Iranian central bank. So that's a secondary boycott. The question, there's a lot of doubt about whether the U.S. will actually do that, because some of these countries will refuse to be bullied. But the report is that there is now some significant economic privation as a result of this. The Iranian currency has lost value. I wonder if you could give us a kind of picture of what all of that looks like. A guy here was just telling me about shortages. His father needs heart disease medicine, and he can't find it, or it's very expensive.
Yes, basically, after they came to the clear realization that you can't wage a war without raising serious havoc in the region, which is also a very stupid thing when all your intelligence agencies tell you if Iran is doing anything out of the normal and out of the agreement. But then they imposed very severe economic sanctions, and they're very happy about it. The central bank has been actually, that is war itself.
Right.
When you sanction the central
economic
bank,
warfare.
Yeah, you've already entered warfare. And of course, Iran retaliated by saying, we will close the Strait of Hormuz if you increase the severity, and it goes into the selling of oil. So this hardship actually brought down the value of the rial. But
could you say to what extent? I mean, the proportions?
Yeah, it's about 20% increase in inflation. I mean, if I would go and buy a dozen eggs in a supermarket today compared to 2 months ago, it's 20% more expensive. If I want to go buy milk, bread, no, people can go buy bread, and
bread is subsidized.
And
can you just explain the subsidy? Because this is a very interesting concept, and Americans don't know what it is.
Yes, well, basically, we learned to have subsidies during the 8-year war. We were low on cash, and we had coupons during the 8-year war. And after that, trying to get back onto our feet and to be able to spread the wealth and be able to protect the people who are poorer in the country by 30%. Are definitely under the red line. So we had subsidies to be able to curb. Ahmadinejad did something very drastic. I'm not an economist, but what happened is he jacked up the price of oil to world standard. That was 7 times the usual price. This happened about 2 years ago.
So oil price had been subsidized, but
yes.
That was lifted.
Yes, lifted. So I bought 1 liter of gas at the pump station, at the gas station, for 100 tomans. I now buy it
for 100
tomans.
Tomans.
Yeah, a tomans is like 100 tomans is like 1/12 of a dollar. But after it was lifted, now I buy it for about 700, 800 tomans a liter, 8 times. To make up for that, of course, the electricity bill also went up 4 or 5 times. The gas bill went up. Telephone bill went up. The governments gave money to individuals through special cards. Then you go to the
cash payment in lieu of the subsidy.
Yes. Every month you go to the ATM machine. You have your card, and you receive a certain amount. Of course, it's still not satisfactory, and they're trying to increase that to a level that will really help out. So there'll be no shortage of this compensation.
Mm-hmm.
But we're used to subsidies because we've had an 8-year war. Coming back to what I was saying before, ordinary things meat, protein products, jacked up about 20% in the past month. So the sanctions had their effect, but immediately the Iranian system, the government, is looking for alternative ways to defend itself. And it's done that in the past. You have to remember that during the war, we learned how to defend with scarce money, because at that time there was war in the Gulf, and we had no possibility of getting weapons. We had to go to the black market, buy weapons 10 times their real price. So we've learned how to deal, and we've had sanctions for 30 years from the U.S. Now the severity of this sanction, I think, will not go on for very long. I'm trying to be realistic. Mm-hmm. Just last week, something happened very interesting. Europe threatened Iran 2 or 3 weeks ago. They said, in 6 months we'll not buy Iranian oil. We'll boycott Iranian oil in 6 months, because in 6 months we'll have enough. All the people who are buying oil from Iran, like Greece, France, Italy, Spain, will be able to control themselves. What happened? Iran said, okay, we're going to cut off oil right now, and you can freeze yourself off in Europe. If you're threatening our livelihood. And the French ambassador went to the parliament last week on Tuesday and literally begged the Majlis to give him a chance to rethink Europe's position. And right afterwards, the Spanish ambassador, the Greek ambassador, the Italian ambassador went to the foreign ministry and the Majlis, the parliament, again reiterating the same position. Give us a chance. We have to think it over. It's cold. 200 people died in France from the cold. So, When you do stupid things, you get serious. Yeah, you pay. This is just the beginning of paying retaliations. So if you give us a hard time, believe me, it's my conviction, you're going to have 10 times the hardship that you impose on us, out of sheer evil. What have the Iranian people done to you?
The price you pay to be a U.S. puppet is to take part in these idiotic exercises.
Of course. And these, of course, Saudi Arabia said we will compensate for the lost oil, but where is Saudi Arabia now? You can't compensate in one day. What are you going to do about thousands of people who are dying from the cold? Right. You can't get that oil. I mean, we always have a humanitarian position. Always Iran has had that after the revolution. I have many stories to tell you from the war. When Saddam attacked our cities with missiles, we didn't retaliate for the longest time, because if we have to retaliate, we hit their cities. We kept warning them not to send missiles. I mean, for the longest time. When there was no other possibilities, then we retaliated. And we had several hundred that we had gotten from North Korea. If you check how we treated the Iraqi prisoners, compare how Iran treated the Iraqi prisoners to what how they treated our prisoners. These are stories that are unknown right now. Mm-hmm. How we treated their prisoners immediately after they were caught. I was many times in the war front because I was shooting documentaries. I was there when they captured 8 or 10 in Kabbalah 5, one of the operations. I was there when they captured them right in the fields where hundreds of Iranians were on the ground, martyred, and wounded, etc. And they put them in an ambulance, these healthy Iraqi soldiers. They put them in an ambulance and took them back. And they're always well treated, because we have laws and principles according to our religion how to treat a prisoner. We've learned, we have principles. You cannot do this, you cannot do that, you cannot beat them, you cannot torture them, and they're just put back into camps. Well, if you compare how we treated the thousands of Iraqis and how they treated our prisoners, these are completely unknown to the American public. Yes. You learn about a country's behavior from these things. There are no documents, no documentary films about these things. One day, I hope, there will be revelations to the American people of what is the innate nature of Iran. And this is one of the things that I've always felt sorry that the America so carefully and orchestratedly demonized, has demonized Iran, that they're not able to think about what is really going on. What is really going on in Iran? Is Iran a nuclear threat? Iran is a threat to world peace? This is what they're saying every day.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
Now, concerning the maybe one of the more recent manifestations of this, right? One of the things we try to do on this program is we're very critical about these color revolutions, CIA people power coups, destabilizations, interfering in internal affairs. Now, in the summer of 2009 here, we had a presidential election, and the candidates were President Ahmadinejad running for re-election. He wanted a second term. And then Mousavi, who was the other candidate, and then probably a couple of others. Maybe you mentioned them too. But this then turned into what the Western media called the Green Revolution of June, July 2009. And we have regarded this as an attempted CIA color revolution or coup, which failed. And I just wonder, could you describe that? And please take as much time as you need, because we're extremely interested in this theme.
When the 2009 election happened, I, as a witness, saw a lot of support in Tehran, the capital of 17 million people, a lot of support for Mir Hossein Mousavi. And this was a fact. He had the majority vote in Tehran. And it looked like Mousavi had won. He announced that he had won prematurely. He didn't take into account all the other cities in Iran, in which in every city Ahmadinejad won. All the countryside in which Ahmadinejad won. But in Tehran, indeed, he did win. And because the media is focused in Tehran, and you could see in the streets of demonstrations, they had like 60% of the city. And so I, as a witness myself, when I heard the election results, was, hey, it couldn't be. Mir Hossein Mousavi won. I saw in the streets that he had a majority. And of course the results came, yes, indeed, in Tehran he had the majority. But what about the countryside? What about other cities, hundreds of other cities, at least 10 major cities, 3 million, 5 million, 6 million, Tabriz, Mashhad, Shiraz, Isfahan, Abadan, Khorramshahr, Yazd. What about those cities? They're all Ahmadinejad. But of course, the damage was done. It was immediately called the disputed, fraudulent election by the Western media, immediately. And it took us a couple of months, and then there was a green movement. Suddenly, the election that was very peaceful and very happy, it was a very jubilant election until the night of the announcement of the results. I mean, we were there, the festive environment in Tehran. People, were cheering on this side as opposed to that side. They were jeering against each other, but it was fun. Everybody was having a good time. There was no contacts. There was no conflict. There was no bloodshed. Nothing. It was a nice election. But as soon as Mir Hossein Mousavi announced that I definitely won, before the numbers were read, he went on announcing that I, according to the numbers, I'm the definite winner of the presidential election of 2009. And when the announcements came the next day and he did not win, then the dispute began, and the West calling it a fraudulent, election. And then from then on, I was watching CNN, Iran crisis. Every other news channel in America was calling this the fraudulent election. And after about 2 months, they came to a solution. Said, okay, let's have a recount of 10% of the ballot boxes at random. You can come in, and the ballot boxes were supervised by at least 7 people of the locals of that area, by both sides, the Mousavi people and the Ahmadinejad people.
Were those the only sides? Were there other candidates?
No, there was Karoubi, and there was also Rezai, who was a general during the war, Mohsen Rezai. And those were the 4 main candidates. And there were fair representation of each ballot box anywhere, in any community in the country. And people who were just normal businessmen who were selected as, the legitimate people to supervise that ballot box. So when the counts were read, each ballot box was signed by 7 people who were well known in that area. So there's no way you could cheat numbers. So they wanted a complete recount, and the government said, no, we can't do it. We'll just give you 10%, 10% random recount will do the job. I made a documentary about this fraudulent so-called election at that time because there was a big question in my mind, So, of course, the recount exposed the same number as the count before. But they continued calling it the Green Revolution. They continued calling it the fraudulent disputed election up to this day. Nobody wanted to hear again the story. Of course, Mir Hossein Mousavi, if he was smart, and he would have kept himself quiet, what would have happened is 4 years later, he would get re-elected because he was so popular. But he went so much against the government. He talked so much, he called the government a liar, the whole system lying, so that you really definitely have 2 aggressive opposing camps now. And the fanning of the flame was orchestrated by the West. I mean, I saw what happened. All you have to do is check into the U.S. media's account of the election. You check the archives of what they were saying. And continued to say, because they really wanted an excuse to really demonize Iran now in a very practical way. Oh, these are liars. They're in power. They don't represent the masses. They don't represent all of the population. Another interesting thing that happened is there was a huge demonstration of the supporters of the government. It was a massive demonstration. After this huge, massive demonstration, on the 9th of day of the Iranian calendar, everything.
The 9th of day.
Day is a month of the Iranian calendar, and we commemorate that day because people really came out with their families, everyone, to demonstrate that they were the majority. Yes, the Green Movement had a good population, and they voted for Mir Hossein Mousavi. I don't know if I think it was like 11 million. That's pretty good. It's a pretty significant minority, but it's a minority. Democratically, they're a minority. If you lose, accept that you lost, and be democratic about it, be fair about it. And this is what they didn't do, because of course, the West was boosting their status as you're the right, they're the wrong. These Ahmadinejad is a new Hitler. He has the government as as ultra extremist terrorist, and Iran has not terrorized anyone. If anyone was terrorist, it would come from Saudi Arabia, not from Iran. So, in other words, they used this as a pretext to further demonize Iran and also obliterate any trace of true examination of who won. This 10% random picking of the ballot boxes was never shown in the Western media. This was completely censored out. That there was a recount, and the recount showed the same results, but you don't see it in the Western media. You don't. If it was even said, it was not elaborated. It was just sort of
the recount was ignored.
Yeah. Completely ignored. Yeah.
Now, concerning Ahmadinejad, this broadcast is attempting to make sure that he gets fair treatment because he's not he's demonized, and it seems to me he has some important positive features that ought to be stressed. First of all, we have this thing that's constantly used that he wants to wipe Israel off the map. Now, I found a website that did a careful word-by-word translation of it, and what he actually said, as far as I know, is the Imam said that the regime holding Quds will disappear or pass from the page of history.
Yes.
Is that about right?
This is exactly what he said. What Ahmadinejad said was nothing new. The Imam had said it 28 years before that. Imam Khomeini has said that. And he was talking about, he said that the Israeli regime will basically disintegrate. He never said, let's fight against it, let's wipe it off with an atom bomb, none of those things. And eventually it came to light that when the Soviet Union disintegrated after the 9 years after the Islamic Revolution, the Imam was right. Those regimes will disintegrate. They'll just fall apart. And this is exactly what they meant for Israel, because of the status it holds, the way it is, or whatever. Not with aggression. The Imam never aggressed against, never declared aggression against Israel. Talked about the Muslim world, talked about the status, he called it a tumor in the region, a cancerous tumor, but he never said, let's wipe it off the map.
Something like maybe the transition from the French Fourth Republic to the French Fifth Republic. In other words, it's a regime change, South Africa from apartheid to post-apartheid, or Soviet to Russian Federation.
Russia. Exactly.
Anyway, this is of course the horse that they beat mercilessly against Ahmadinejad. Now, what I've learned here, and I'd love to hear your opinion, Ahmadinejad has a program, at least as a perspective, to build 22 million housing units. Mm-hmm. This interests us very much because this is the idea is that housing is very expensive, and if you build 22 million units, you've really done something to raise the standard of living, because it means that all of this rent. The other one is the land reform, that he wants to distribute parcels of land to people for a very small
that hasn't happened
amount.
Yet. That hasn't crystallized. It's a theory. But the one with the building apartments has begun, and the project is basically buying a house in Iran is expensive. It's if you want to buy an apartment anywhere in Tehran, it's more than $130,000 for an apartment. So what he did is he said he gave government land to building conglomerates. The land was free; it was by government, and then the government also supported the building of it, and people who wanted housing, they would give an amount which would amount to the building material, which would be let's say like $20,000 for a 100 square meter apartment. So that's feasible. Anybody who's working in normal middle class or low middle class can afford it. And this is what he proposed.
And the mortgage, I guess, that's going to be paid over time.
And the mortgage without interest. So that's working.
A big plus.
Yeah, that is working. And but we have to wait at least 3 more years before it crystallizes completely. But yes, in my program we talked about the students who brought up the proposal and proposed it to Ahmadinejad. I brought those to the program, and I talked about this situation. And we're in the middle of the way, and hopefully it will come to completion in 3 years.
Now back to the question of the subsidies, because as you've explained before, Ahmadinejad removed certain subsidies.
Yes.
Was this wise? Was this well done?
Well, personally, I have my criticism of it because I talk to people who work with me and other people. They're not happy. People in the countryside are more or less happy because they don't have that much telephone bills, gas bills. They don't have. Many of them don't have cars, or they have like bus transport. People in the tribes, they get this 50,000 a month.
The subsidy,
the subsidy.
The cash payment in lieu of the subsidies that have been removed.
It sort of works, and they say that it has wiped out the drastic poverty problem that we had, the extreme poverty problem in the countryside. But people in the city are not satisfied. They feel it has to be doubled or tripled to be fair.
The payment.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So right now it's 50,000. They say, okay, if it becomes 120,000, it might answer our increased bills. So this is a fact. Right now we're working on that. It's a challenge.
But still, the impression you get from Ahmadinejad is that his political base really is poorer workers and farmers, peasants, rural population. Is that accurate?
Yes. I think that is accurate. He has done more on that level than either President Khatami or President Hashim Rafsanjani. He's done more on that level, and he doesn't have like a family that is rich. Mm-hmm. And you never hear about his son who owns this or his daughter who owns that. He's free of that.
Good.
Of course, there's criticism of Ahmadinejad plenty in the streets. I mean, there is criticism, but he won really because of that position that he had.
He's a populist.
Yes, and he's very active in going to all the different states within Iran, visiting them at least once a year, and then talking to the people. So he's a populist. Yes, it works well on that level, but indeed, there's plenty of criticism against him too, among the religious.
Have you mentioned a couple of themes?
Well, we think that when he was, I think he, according to the belief of the Hezbollahis in Iran, he was sort of when the leader said change or retain the minister of intelligence, he was reluctant to do it. He wanted his own minister of intelligence, and that 10-day delay in obeying the leader made him very unpopular with Hezbollah in Iran, which is 30% of the very serious supporters, 35%. He became much less popular. Mm-hmm. I mean, he really fell from the peak. But he of course he denied any disobeying, and he always retains that.
Was that just a formal question of authority, or was there a political difference between these two intelligence people?
Well, Ahmadinejad has an independent mind, and he has, and some of the other things that he might say. Many people criticize him on, for example, the Holocaust thing. They say he overdid it. There's been criticism of that. But this is a free country. You can go in the street and say things what you want. And I lived here during the Shah's regime too. You didn't dare say anything, but anything.
Sure.
Yeah. But this, so he is criticized, and they're waiting for his 2-year term to come to an end.
Which is when?
In about a year and a half.
So new elections would be
in a year and a half.
In 1.5 years. So
yes.
This means in what? The middle of 2013?
Yes.
Summer of 2013?
Yes. You have to make sure about that date. But a year and a half.
Is it a 4-year term?
Yeah. We say jokingly we have to tolerate Ahmadinejad another 2 years. But he has his base with the ardent Muslims in Iran. But of course, I'm saying this because no one is holy.
Sure.
Yeah,
what I understand, though, is that he has put a great deal of stress on scientific development, laboratories,
Absolutely.
Technology.
Absolutely.
I was very impressed when he went to Lebanon. He brought a kind of electron microscope. Am I right? He brought some scientific equipment that was extremely advanced.
Yes, I heard about that, but I don't know it in detail at this point. But yes, he has been very effective in increasing Iran's scientific position. Sharif University, according to U.S. statistics, is the world's best physics, electronics, mathematics, the world's best. About 90%, 95% of Sharif University graduates enter into the United States with full scholarships. They're the best. So Iran has a very strong scientific position. And when we lost our nuclear scientist 2 weeks ago by Israeli Mossad terrorists.
Are you sure of that? How about the CIA?
Or CIA.
Let me just say,
it goes hand in hand.
I understand. If you're in Israel, if you're from Israel, you can't come to Iran. Right? Israelis are not allowed. But from the U.S., you've got this constant back and forth. Much easier to infiltrate a team.
Of course. And of course, we had the Mujahideen Khalq, the MEK,
right,
which is a terrorist.
MEK.
Which is still in the U.S.'s terrorist list.
Right, but you have all sorts of prominent U.S. politicians who say, take them off the list.
Yes.
They demonstrate at the White House all the time.
They have a very strong lobby in the Senate and the Congress. And the position the Congress takes against Iran, and the Senate is also as a joke. They have 98% votes against Iran. Maybe you have Ron Paul or Dennis Kucinich saying something against it. But this is really funny because I lived in the States in the 70s. I watched anti-Vietnam demonstrations, and this is not the U.S. that I witnessed even in that era. It's much more fascistic, and you can see it in the media.
Sure.
It's all very, very one-sided. I hope that one day this will change and we will see the reciprocal.
Okay. Now, back just to the color revolutions. The Iranian view of what is called the Arab Spring. Because from our point of view, the broadcast and my website, we're very skeptical about this. Because what we see is WikiLeaks, Assange, a CIA limited hangout, targeting, let's say, Ben Ali, Gaddafi, Mubarak, and all these people. The idea is that the U.S. is not happy with these long-term puppets. Gaddafi, not really in the same category as the other two, but let's take Ben Ali and Mubarak, right? They've been serving the U.S., getting along, satraps, viceroys, whatever, for all these years. But now the U.S. Has new needs. They can't tolerate even the semblance of an independent government. And Mubarak, in particular, had said no. The U.S. wanted troops for Afghanistan. He said no. Troops for Iraq, no. Bases of the U.S. in Israel, no. He wanted especially the Sunni Arab alliance of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Gulf states, and some others, Jordan, against Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the more radical people. And Mubarak was not interested in any of that. And he didn't want a direct treaty with a direct sort of military treaty with Israel, in other words, beyond Camp David. So it's clear to us that the U.S. set these things in motion. In other words, there's also a depression going on. There's high unemployment. There's the economic privation is very real. Something's about to explode. So the U.S. says, well, if it's going to explode, we'll make it explode, and we'll use it to create governments that are weaker. We'll make sure that the existing entrenched satraps are thrown out, but what we're going to have after that is sort of chaos. But weak states, micro-states, mini-states, failed states, chaos, and if it's the Muslim Brotherhood financed by Saudi Arabia, that's fine, because the whole thing will be weaker. So Tantawi today in Egypt is certainly, he's weaker, he's less able to say no to the U.S. than Mubarak would have been. Now I understand, I've talked to people here at the conference we've been attending about people who were actually part of the Tahrir Square. And, of course, what they experienced was the tremendous oppression of living under Mubarak. But if we look at the big strategic picture, how do you see all these things?
I see it a little bit differently. I think things have been conglomerating they've been growing. The pressure has been cooking for 30 years, 3 decades. And I think, I think Iran has had a role. 3 years ago, it stood up and it remained independent. It retained its position up to this day. It's been honest about that. And I think Iran's resistance has had an effect in the region. That's one thing. The second thing, very important, is Hezbollah was successful in fighting back Israel. It really redeemed the Arab nationalistic status and the Muslim status. It can be done. You can resist Israeli aggression
militarily.
Yes.
Sure.
So what we have is simultaneously 5, 6, 7 countries. They shook off their dictators. Yes, I agree with you, because up to this day in Egypt, The generals are there. Camp David Accord is still in position. We in Iran cannot go to Egypt right now. We can't send our correspondents or our filmmakers because it's the same position as Mubarak's time. Is still in position. There's no strong diplomatic relationship yet between Egypt because the generals are basically there still. But I have but of course they're going to be the Muslim Brotherhood is going to have a different position in a few months. I think in June they're going to have elections or whatever.
They say.
Yes, they say, yeah. And they're cool about it because they know they have the majority, and we're going to see what happens to Tantawi. I think you're ahead. You're ahead of me, or maybe I am ahead of you. I don't know which, but I think I'm optimistic. I think what's happening in Yemen, Yemenis are tough fighters. Yemenis are very close spiritually to Hezbollah. Yemenis have ousted Ben Ali. Of course, his representatives are still there. So you're right.
Saleh.
Yeah, Saleh is there. Yes, Saleh. Excuse me, Saleh. He was ousted 2 weeks ago. Okay. But I think in the long run, as we saw in the elections in Tunisia and in Egypt, the Muslim advent, the Muslim base is going to pick up. Of course, there's always the Wahhabi virus that might infiltrate any of these positions. But I'm more optimistic because the Wahhabi virus is a minority. It's really a minority. The Muslim world is not like that. And it was amazing that the Arab Spring, as the West calls it, and we call it Islamic Awakening, occurred at a time when Hezbollah was under extreme pressure by world courts about Rafiq Hariri. Rafiq Hariri's death was blamed on Hezbollah, and they were going to have all kinds of courts against Hezbollah, and was reaching a boiling point when suddenly Tunisia went into revolution. A few months later, Egypt went into revolution, and then later Yemen, and then Bahrain, and Libya. I mean, it took the pressure off Hezbollah. We say this is God sent. The Muslim population of the region say, no one predicted this. The CIA could not predict this.
But let's just looking into that now.
Yeah.
Hezbollah defeated the Israelis militarily in 2006, but there's also the other thing Hezbollah was able to do was the U.S. wanted the Cedars Revolution, the great color revolution for Lebanon, which was going to be led by the golden youth of the Maronite community, as far as I could see, right? The Christians, but with a lot of money, as always with these color revolutions. The people that are most prominent, right? The telegenic ones, or the internet, Twitter-oriented, westernized people who have, frankly, money.
Yeah.
Then when we get to Syria, this seems to me this is the crucial experiment, right?
Yes.
That Syria is targeted by the same thing. Now here, surely we must say, this is NATO, this is the CIA, this is not the Syrian people. I was in Syria, and my analysis is, these are death squads sent in. They're killers. Some of them come from Libya, from Afghanistan, from Chechnya, from far away. And they go in there and start killing, and they'll kill anybody. Assad, pro-Assad, pro-Assad, anti-Assad, Alawite, Sunni, Kurd, Druze, whoever you are, they'll kill you. Christian, any kind of Christian. And then Al Jazeera arrives and says, aha, Assad is killing more people. Now here, you're saying the pressure is off Hezbollah. If Syria falls to a color revolution, this is a disaster of immense proportions, because it means Iran loses the only major Arab ally, and the Hezbollah have their depth cut, and they're sitting out isolated on the coast.
Yes, as I was mentioning, at that time, a couple of years ago, when the Arab Spring or the Islamic Awakening occurred, it took the pressure off Hezbollah and the courts, going to the UN court, etc.
Right. Hariri.
Yeah. Because first they blamed Syria, and then they apologized formally to Assad. That, no, it's not Syria. It's Hezbollah now. What happened is the Western conglomerate powers decided that a more convenient target is Syria, better than Iran. Iran they can't attack because they're afraid of the domino theory. it's going to be a havoc you cannot manage anymore. The potentials of unmanageable havoc is too great. And the first thing that's going to fall apart or become under serious danger is Israel itself. So they went for the easier targets, Assad and Syria. And this is an ongoing. All the West's pressure now is on Syria. Anything could happen now. Anything could happen. Well, the Alawites they have 12% of the population. So they don't have a majority. But they have a lot of support. I mean, if you go into the statistics, they do have support.
Yes, Assad, my reading is Assad has 65-70% support.
Yes. But 65-70% is good, but with all the propaganda against it, by all the major media, and infiltration by active terrorist groups.
There it is.
That is very dangerous. It makes the country insecure. Politically, it's going to damage the country. So the point is, Syria is in the crosshairs, and they're taking it very serious to change the regime. Iran can no longer. They've given up on Iran, I believe. And of course, they keep. There's a propaganda war always. Israel is going to attack Iran preemptively in May, June, July. We've heard this so many times for the past 10 years. It's a joke now. But Syria is under serious pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, the future is opaque. I can't see what's going to happen.
Now, just the specific time we're talking. Last night, the Russian Federation and China vetoed the latest NATO-backed attempt in the UN Security Council to get the ball rolling on an attack on Syria. If we could just maybe one last thing, because I know we're running out of time, but the relation of Iran to Russia, pluses and minuses, lights and shadows, right? Mm-hmm. Russia did finally build the Bushehr nuclear reactor. They did this, but there's still frictions. Mm. And of course, right now, though, Russia is indispensable in the Security Council, and also the fact that they sent the Admiral Kuznetsov and this Russian fleet to Tartus in Syria. This has caused NATO, I think, to think twice, and they've apparently delivered some pretty good surface-to-air missiles that are going to keep NATO at least thinking twice before they attack.
Yes. Russia's position, I think, is interesting. I think the Russians learned a lesson from Libya. They were cheated on Libya, and they're not going to be cheated again on Syria. I think they're pretty definite about that. But you have to consider the continuous pressure from the West on China and Russia. For the time being, I think the vetoing is a great joy. Everybody is relieved that not one superpower, two superpowers have vetoed this. And I hope that this will continue on, this position. You cannot. It's a very volatile situation because there's so much determination to weaken Assad and the government in Syria. Because if it was just media propaganda, that was one thing. There's serious on ground, boots on the ground. I mean, every day there's killing and there's different groups, unseen groups, obscure groups. For the time being, I think it's great news. But no one can tell what the future will bring. I mean, I remember every time China wanted to do something, take a position, and to defend Iran or something like that in the past, they got an economic I would say, virus. And suddenly they announced such and such thing came from China, and so we will not import any more Chinese textile. The West knows how to punish these people. So I'm always worried about the economic hitmen or the conspirators against China and Russia, who need to, for them to keep being superpowers, they need to have the economy to be able to sell well. So for the time being, so good so far. So far, so good. So we'll see what happens. But we don't consider Russia a very trustable ally, but we're very happy it took that position. Because we witnessed in the past, they've sometimes, with the sanctions, they've been against us. They didn't vote for us. But we're very happy. And one reason is because of Syria. Russia has its biggest bases in Syria. It's fortified Syria with effective weapons. It also has given Syria good amount of economic aid in the past, continuing in the order of billions of dollars. So Syria is very important for Russia. And after what happened to Gaddafi, I think Russia is not happy. It's angry. So he wants to make up for that. So during these days, so far so good. We'll see what the future will bring. We have to keep in mind that there's a very serious and drastic effort. The same pressure on Iran is now deviated to Syria. I mean the military part, the military aggressive part. But with Iran, they can't take into account other factors, the Strait of Hormuz, the domino factor, Hezbollah sending rockets into Tel Aviv, and those are things very, very dangerous and very potentially feasible because, Sayyid Hassan has said very clearly, and the Israelis know that Sayyid Hassan doesn't lie. They say our leaders lie, but Sayyid Hassan does not lie. When he says he'll do something...
That is exactly who?
It's Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah.
Nasrallah,
yes. Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. The Israelis...
The head of Hezbollah.
Yeah, the Hezbollah. They believe Netanyahu and Barak will lie, and as the record shows. But Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah does not lie. He says, if you aggress against Beirut, if you aggress against Iran, we'll retaliate. And we will retaliate this time, completely in the capital. So, Iran is not a worthwhile target. It's a dangerous target. You might be stung vitally. Mm-hmm. So they put all that pressure that they want on Syria, which is a weaker competitor now. And this is what they always do. They attack the weak. They attack Libya. After he dismantles his nuclear thing, they attack him. Syria is a good target, and there's plenty of appetite to go for Syria. The wolves are just circling, the calf and the mother buffalo. But how long can the buffalo stand these hungry wolves circling around it? So this is a situation that it worries us. But at the same time, we have witnessed miracles in this region. Something you don't expect happens at a time. You didn't expect it, and it's not on the statistics board. It just happens. And this has been a steady pattern in the past years. So, inshallah, what we're hoping for is peace. We don't want people aggressing against people, starting wars. This is what we hope for. I think this is really, really what that's why when you go into the streets, you talk to people, they're not alarmed. I don't know why they're not. We go back to the first question. People are not alarmed. I don't know. They're not duped either. People are realistic in Iran. We just hope that nothing will happen. We feel, first of all, Syria, we hope, will be able to withstand this pressure. Even if Syria falls, Hezbollah has been practicing to be independent for a long time. Before the 33-day war, I was in Lebanon, south of Lebanon. They told me that all the villages in the south of Lebanon, southern Lebanon, all the villages are independent with armament, food, and water to withstand anything to up to a year. Each village independently. So they've been, digging into the trenches from a long time ago. They're ready, and so even if Syria falls, they're hoping that that Hezbollah and Hamas will, but they don't realize that things have changed forever. Israel does not realize, and the hearers of Israel, the audience of Israel in the United States, does not realize that things have changed here forever. People have awakened, and they're ready. You can't change them. It's like saying suddenly you ask me to become an alcoholic. I can't drink alcohol. Suddenly you ask me to do things I never do in my life. I can't do that. I'm what I am, and no one will turn back. They've changed, and this dream of there's a solution to everything. I wish the Israeli people would realize that there's a reality and face that reality. No one wants to bomb them off the earth, and what they have to realize the reality. And you can't bomb these people off, wipe them off the earth. These are people. The region has changed. Iran changed 33 years ago. If Iran was going to fail, it would have failed the first 3 months. It hasn't failed. Even when you aggressed against it, it didn't fail. Even when you sanctioned it, it didn't fail. The same pattern will hold true for the other states. So wake up. I mean, don't be delusionary. And accept it, and then meet it realistically, and not aggressively. If as you say, when the six-packers wake up in America, and they will wake up one day and find out what is really going on, they will read your books, they will read your analyses. Right now, they're occupied with Fox News and CNN. That'll satisfy them. But one day, when they probably it's the day that when they go to the gas station and have to pay 5 times for a gallon of gas, then they will pick up their Winchesters and ask, "Who's done this? Who's done?"
Well, looking forward to that happy day. We've taken a lot of your time now. We have to essentially end this segment. I want to thank again Professor Nader Talebzadeh, independent filmmaker, film producer, television commentator, the host of the very well regarded Raz, the program. That's The Secret, RAZZ, an audience of 7 million people weekly, about a tenth of everybody in Iran, and I'm sure beyond that, right?
Yes, I understand.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor.
We'll probably be, let's see how we structure our broadcast today. We'll probably be back with some more in the following segment.
Okay.
All right, now continuing with this week's broadcast of World Crisis Radio from Tehran, Iran, I'd like to introduce a very interesting guest and a briefing on a subject that we needed to know more about. We had this Hollywoodism conference for the last several days, and one of the speakers is Professor Colin Cavell. He was for 8.5 years an assistant professor at the University of Bahrain. And in what discipline?
I teach political science.
Political science. Currently a professor at Holyoke Community College in Massachusetts, but able to do that as distance learning from a home in the Austin, Texas area. Now, we're looking for Professor Cavell to give us the lowdown on the Gulf from I think, an extremely important point of view. And remember that Bahrain is this crucial experiment because it's where the U.S. and the Saudi interests collide with the upsurge in the Arab world. So I don't know where to start. Maybe we've got about 15 minutes. Why don't you just proceed in any way that you think best?
Well, thank you, Webster, for inviting me onto your show. I'm honored to be here and to talk about Bahrain, to let the knowledge about U.S. involvement in Bahrain and the Middle East expand so that people can be aware of what we're doing there. Bahrain is a small chain of 33 islands in the Persian-Arabian Gulf. And I say Persian-Arabian Gulf because the Iranians claim it as the Persian Gulf and the Arabs claim it as the Arab Gulf. And the U.S. military, when it sides with the Arabs, as they are doing now, calls it the Arabian Gulf. Now, this is a small chain of islands which many Americans are unaware of. However, if I mention a connection with the United States, most people will become, and they'll say, "Oh yes, I know where Bahrain is." When Michael Jackson lost his court case, he left the United States. He went to Bahrain, and that's how many Americans know where Bahrain is. That's where Michael Jackson went after he finished his court case in the United States. Now, why did he go to Bahrain? Because he's friends with the king's son, and Bahrain is a monarchy ruled by the Al Khalifa family that has been in power for 128 years. 128 years, an absolute monarchy in the Persian-Arabian Gulf. Why is it important, this small chain of islands? Primarily because the United States Fifth Fleet is located there, is based there. The Central Command of the United States military, of the United States Navy, is based in Bahrain. And that allows geostrategically a very important area by which any power who controls Bahrain has a control, they can assert hegemonic control over the entire Middle East. The United States was able to not only It has ships there in the Jubair naval station, but as well it uses the Sheikh Issa Air Base in Bahrain, and many of the sorties over Iraq during the Iraq War were not only from the ships based in Bahrain, but also from the air base there. So much of the war was fought from Bahrain. The weapons were funneled through Bahrain, etc. Geostrategically, it is a crucial piece of landmass for the United States forward deployed, forward projected force in the Middle East. Now, what is the problem with Bahrain? Well, as you know, as most Americans know, we're taught that monarchy, by its very nature, is tyrannous. And when you have a 128-year-old monarchy, a family that the United States supports, and there's no democracy, people eventually get tired of tyranny, just like the Americans rose up against the monarchy of the British and George III. And that is what the people in Bahrain have been doing for the last year. Yes, they were motivated by the events in Tunisia, the events in Egypt, but Bahrain was the third country to erupt when the citizenry started on February 14th of last year to protest against the monarchy in a very big way. There's always been ongoing protests against the government there, but starting on February 14th last year, a major move toward political reform in Bahrain was launched by the opposition. And the opposition is composed of a majority of the population. Now, Bahrain, as I said, is a small chain of island nations, with the biggest island being Manama. It has a population of 1,200,000 or 1,300,000, and many of those are expatriate workers. However, the citizenry of Bahrain is about approximately 550,000 people. And on the streets of Bahrain in late February of 2011, you had over 300,000 people on the streets. In other words, more than half the population of the country was out in opposition to the 128-year-old Khalifa monarchy, making Bahrain, the Bahrain revolt, the largest Arab revolt of any of the rebellions that we've seen in the last year. For example, if Egypt were to, of its 82 million population, if it had more than half the population out on the streets, it would have to have at least 41 million. And we all know that the Egyptian rebellion has not even come close to that. So Bahrain, with more than half the population on the streets, demonstrates the complete majoritarian opposition to this monarchy. Now, the Americans, through the American media, the mainstream media, have heard about the revolts in Tunisia, they've heard about the revolts in Egypt, and the revolts in Libya, and now they're hearing about the revolts in Syria. But the mainstream American media is completely silent on the revolts in Bahrain. Why is that? Three major reasons. One, U.S. dependency on oil. With this dependency on oil through the Persian Gulf, going through the Strait of Hormuz, this is seen as crucial for United States industry, and we are addicted, as President George Bush said back in 2006. The United States is addicted to oil, and as anybody who has dealt with an addict knows that morality or law will not prevent an addict from getting the substance he needs or she needs. And so the U.S., since 1945, and since the age of oil has expanded after World War II, has employed behaviors that have been very detrimental to many governments. We have overthrown governments, we have corrupted governments, we have denied access to markets, to countries, all in the name of oil. And all of this goes back to an agreement. The second reason why the mainstream media is quiet in the U.S., agreement between Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Abdulaziz ibn Saud back in 1945 in the Bitter Lake in Egypt, in the Red Sea, in the Nile north of the Red Sea, where they agreed after 2 months before FDR's death, toward the end of World War II, that the United States would support militarily the House of Saud in Saudi Arabia in perpetuity in exchange for cheap and easy access to oil. In other words, the United States, which had was going to be one of the co-victors of World War II, was making an agreement in the Middle East for secure access to cheap and easy access to oil for a very long period of time. And the model of this agreement was that we will maintain one house in power, but it would put a straitjacket on the population because the populations would not have any power. We would keep these autocratic leaders in power in Saudi Arabia in exchange for easy and cheap access to oil. And we have utilized this model in the Gulf kingdoms and other countries ever since. And this is a pact with the devil that the U.S. made, but it also meant that oil trumped any type of interest we had in our supposedly attachment to democratic values. The third reason why the mainstream media of the U.S. is silent on the situation in Bahrain is the legacy of the Iranian Revolution, the successful 1979 Iranian Revolution, which sent shockwaves throughout the Western world. Dr. Tarpley has talked about this on this program, I'm sure, many a time. I've heard him here in Iran speak about this, so he's well versed on it. The Iranian Revolution shook up the foreign policy establishment in the United States and Western world, and they vowed never to allow this to happen again. And that's why they do not want any successful revolt either against the House of Saud, which is the main monarch that controls the majority oil in the Middle East, as well as the supporting Gulf kingdoms, Kuwait, Oman, UAE, Bahrain, and Qatar. So all of these Gulf kingdoms, all members of the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC, are all supportive and under the hegemonic control of Saudi Arabia, and the United States backs all these kingdoms. And because of this, because the House of Saud does not want the Arab Spring to move into Saudi Arabia or any other kingdoms, they have put the word out to the U.S., no Arab Spring in the Gulf kingdoms. Mainstream American media, as Herman and Chomsky wrote about in their book Manufacturing Consent, they don't want to lose profit. They don't want to lose access to governmental sources or to corporate sources. And these governmental and corporate sources are telling them, shut up about Bahrain. It's an implied memo. Be quiet about Bahrain. Things there are complicated. So that's the situation. You've got 70% of the island nation of Bahrain out on the streets, 70% of the population, which is primarily Shia, in opposition to a minority government run by the Sunni leaders, the Al Khalifa. So 30% Sunni monarchy trying to rule over 70% majority Shia. Now, is it simply a Sunni Shia divide? No, it's not. But the Khalifas push it on this measure because this way they can claim without any evidence. Indeed, the United States Defense Department, CIA, the inquiry report, even commissioned by the King of Bahrain, all concluded that Iran has nothing to do with the rebellion in Bahrain. However, they claim that because of the Shia dominance in Bahrain, it must be those Iranians who are provoking it. And there's probably some sort of fifth column established by Iran that are instigating the opposition in Bahrain. But having lived there for 8.5 years, having seen the discrimination that goes on not only against the expatriate Indian workers, Pakistani workers, etc., those poor laborers who are actually building the country, but also seeing the discrimination against Anybody who's Shia, because if you're Shia in Bahrain, you can't join the military, you can't be advanced in any position, and you will be on a different economic level than the minority Sunni population. They are tired of the oppressive nature of a monarchical system. They've had 120 years of monarchy, 128 years of monarchy, and they want freedom just like the rest of the masses in the Arab world want freedom. And basically, Webster, this is what's going on in Bahrain.
So we continue to be here with Professor Cavell, and we're talking about Bahrain, the country that he lived in for 8.5 years. Now, you've just given us a quick overview. In terms of the something like a class analysis or economic analysis of who's doing the rebelling in Bahrain, is that what does the population look like? You have workers, farmers. Who are they? Do any of the foreigners join in, or how does that work?
All of the Arab revolts in the Middle East, North Africa, MENA region are economically inspired. A lot of unemployment, a lot of disparities in wealth, and you see this also reflected in Bahrain. You have more than a quarter of the population of Bahrain lives below the poverty level of BD, which the Bahraini dinar, 309 BD per month. So you have a lot of citizens who live in poverty in Bahrain, despite the fact that it's one of these oil Gulf kingdoms. Meanwhile, the caliphs have palaces all over the island. They live in splendor. They travel the world on a weekly basis to Monaco, to Paris, etc. So the show and the exuberance of wealth that they display while there's poverty in Bahrain engenders hatred and as well the taking of the land of Bahrain. Bahrain, as I said, is an island nation, and yet there is only one small public beach in all of Bahrain for the population. All the rest of the beaches are taken by the caliphs and their allies and controlled as private property. There's many things like this. This is just beginning to touch the surface of the outrage of living in a land where one family believes it can run roughshod over the entire population. That's because they have no respect or see the population as autonomous agents able to think on their own or participate in politics. They see them as a mass, as a mob that needs to be ruled over with an iron fist.
Now, at the beginning of this rebellion, we saw this column of tanks from Saudi Arabia come in. Are the Saudi troops still there?
Saudi troops are definitely still there. Supposedly invited in by King Hamad Al Khalifa, although many suspect that the Saudi king directed it when he saw the 300,000 plus people on the streets, and they went in to make sure that these citizenry would not succeed. So they had to send in extra troops, supplementary troops, because most of the Bahraini military, as I said earlier, none of the Shias are allowed to join the military. And that's the majority of the population. So who do they get to man the military? They bring in mercenaries from other countries, mostly from Pakistan and Jordan and Syria, etc. So there's mercenaries who comprise the Bahraini military, and they could not handle when a majority of the population were demanding the ouster of the king. Now, initially, the population just wanted some changes, maybe to a constitutional monarchy from an absolute monarchy. But when the killing started, when the regime reacted by killing the population, the demonstrators, then they demanded the ouster of the monarchy. And so the situation heated up very fast, and the so-called Peninsula Shield Force from the GCC, but it's mostly Saudi troops with a few troops from the UAE and Qatar, came in on the Ides of March, the 15th of March, or the day before the 14th, and they were able to assist and man the highways and the streets with tanks and whatnot. And this allowed the Bahraini indigenous forces to go after and start beating the protesters, jailing the protesters, engaging in torture of doctors and nurses, and then many murders of protesters to make it clear, and also reporters. One thing I should mention, and Dr. Tarpley is aware of this, I think, that Bahrain is now one of the 10 most dangerous places on earth for reporters, as reported by major reporting organizations. It has fallen from the rank of, I think it was 60 something in 2002 to 173 out of 179 nations today. Reporters Without Frontiers, according to their statistics. So it's a very dangerous place for reporters. You're not allowed to report from Bahrain, unless you want to praise the king, of course, which is also true when I was there. If anybody said anything against the king, you were suspect, and you would be brought up on investigation. I myself was brought up twice on investigation, but primarily because somebody wanted me dismissed from the university, so they got a student to say I had said the king could kiss my ass.
So the crime of lèse-majesté is alive and well in Bahrain. Now, I guess maybe the last question would be, where is this all headed? It looks to me like if a revolt ever broke out in Saudi Arabia, if that Peninsula Shield bunch had to go someplace else, right? If they had got to be pulled out, that might be the moment for the 300,000 to come back in the streets. And do you think these caliphs can hang on indefinitely, or how long?
Well, you make a good point, Dr. Tarpley. What happens if the revolt spreads to Saudi Arabia? And we do actually see, because the eastern provinces of Saudi Arabia, oil-rich provinces, are dominated by Shia there as well. And there have been a number of demonstrations and uprisings in the eastern provinces of Saudi Arabia. Those as well have not been covered by the Western press, but they are happening. So if the Peninsula Shield Force has to be pulled out of Bahrain to safeguard the Saudi monarch, then that would be allowing the opposition in Bahrain easy access to overthrow the monarchy. But I would also say that they may be able to achieve their political goals of getting rid of the caliphs, even with the GCC force there. Why do I say that? Because we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the Bahraini revolt on February 14th, and the opposition is strong. They're out on a daily basis, and I think they've seen the hypocrisy of the United States. The United States, that's the irony, Dr. Tarpley. I taught my students all about Jeffersonian democracy, Republican government, separation of powers, checks and balances, federalism, etc. And my students, they try to go out and implement these reforms. And who does the American government support in the end? They support the monarchy to crush them. And it's ironical, but it demonstrates the hypocrisy that is so rampant with American foreign policy in the region, and that's why the U.S. is so despised. And if Americans knew what our government was doing in the region, they would not only be outraged, they would be calling our leaders treasonous, just as they called Benedict Arnold a treasoner for siding with George III against the Continental Army during the American Revolution.
Well, quite an indictment, and I think completely justified. So, if there's anything else to add, any final note?
I just thank you for educating the American people